Welcome to the Community Services versus Justice, Which Course is Right for You webinar. My name is Danielle McGowan and I'm the Industry Placement Coordinator at Kangan Institute. So before we get started, I'd like to run through some netiquette for this webinar. You will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar. Please type any questions into the Q&A button that you can see at the bottom of your screen. Alex and Catherine will be your moderators for this session. They will be answering some of the questions throughout the webinar. If your question is not answered during the webinar, we will address the questions at the end of the webinar. Please note that we will not be utilising the raise hand function in tonight's webinar. Just a reminder to please be respectful to the rights, privacy, safety, opinions and beliefs of others and demonstrate appropriate and respectful behaviour and use of language. We hope you enjoy this webinar and our virtual open day. So as I said, my name is Danielle McGowan and I'm the Industry Placement Coordinator. Part of my role is to source placements within industry for a range of courses, one of which is the Community Services course. So I source the placement, I allocate placements to students, and then they attend those placements to complete their course. Here with me tonight is Carla Martins, which I'll get into in a moment, but I'll just share my screen so you can see the PowerPoint that we've prepared for you, or I've prepared for you. Just that. Okay. So, Community Services versus Justice, which course is right for you? Is this webinar right for you? So potentially you have an idea about the type of work that you want to do, but you're not sure which qualification is preferred by industry. Maybe you have a specific course in mind, but you need a better idea about what the kind of careers or further study pathways it could lead to. Maybe you've got an idea about the industry that you want to work in, but you're not sure if it would be suitable, if you're suitable for that type of work. Or maybe you know exactly what you want to do and you know your dream career, but you're interested in getting behind the scenes look from an industry expert. So if you fit into any of these categories, this is the right webinar for you. Now, the courses that are available with Kangan Institute in the Justice and Community Services area are the Certificate 4 in Community Services, the Diploma of Community Services, the Diploma of Justice, and the Advanced Diploma of Justice. And the types of units, so if you were to study justice with us, the types of units you'd be studying, in a diploma, you'd be studying things like corrections, family violence, criminal justice system, criminal law, customs and policing. And then if you moved on into the advanced diploma, you'd be doing things such as, units such as sociology, investigative processes, child protection, criminology, psychology and case management. Alternatively, if you were to study community services, you'd be looking at, and you were studying the Certificate 4, you'd be looking at units such as alcohol and other drugs, loss and grief support, family violence, criminal law, mental health and homelessness. And if you're looking at studying the diploma, you'd be looking at sociology, alcohol and other drugs, counselling, trauma, mental health and case management. Now, if you did want to move on to further study options, we have a couple of pathways into further study with Federation University and Deakin University, although they're not your only options. They are who we have pathways available with. So if you were studying after studying the Advanced Diploma of Justice, you'd be able to go on to do the Bachelor of Criminal Justice with Federation University, the Diploma of Justice, the same thing, but with less credits. Diploma of Community Services, you could move on to a Bachelor of Community and Human Services with 8 credits. And if you were moving to Deakin, you'd be looking at, if you'd studied the Advanced Diploma of Justice, you could move into the Bachelor of Criminology, and you'd be guaranteed entry with credits determined upon application. And the same with Diploma of Community Services, you could move into the Bachelor of International Studies with a guaranteed entry and credits determined upon application. So there are quite a few pathways, and we might take a bit of a further look at that when we have a chat to our industry expert, which is now. So Carla is the lead educator of the Justice and Community Services courses at Kangan Institute. She's worked in community services and justice fields for 12 years in many roles, including child protection, youth justice, counselling for both offenders and victims, just to name a few. So Carla, thanks for joining us. I'll just stop sharing my screen so we can see you properly.
Hi, Danielle.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good on this cold evening, but not as cold as usual.
I hear you. So I guess the first question that I think we want to know is a bit more about you. So you've worked in both community services, in the community services sector, the justice sector. What are those industries really like to work in?
Okay.
Look, and a bit more about what you did in those sectors would be great.
Sure. I started my career straight after uni in child protection. So obviously that's one where lots of students or people interested in doing community services courses want to end up in. So that's where I started, in child protection. Moved on to youth justice related areas. So now you're seeing the switch from the community services into the justice courses. So the youth justice area. And I worked in the residential setting. So where kids are locked up, also in the community setting. So kids who don't go to jail, but still need support and supervision. And I also did a group conferencing between victims and offenders, which was pretty interesting and challenging role for a little while. And I went on to later specialise in counselling. So I worked, obviously, as a counsellor, worked with a lot of victims, a lot of perpetrators, offenders, and the like. So that's a bit of an overview of my work experience. And I think it's a really fascinating field, and to have the choice of jumping between one and the other is really exciting.
Oh, fantastic. You got a plethora of experience. And what did you find when working? Obviously, you've worked in both areas and now you've also taught in both areas. So what are the differences and the similarities that you found between the community services sector and the justice sector?
Yeah, there's obviously quite a few things that are fairly similar. You know, there's a couple of things that you do, whether that's casework or case management work, which tends to be the same in both of those areas. So client work. You sometimes have a little bit of a difference in terms of the types of clients that you might encounter. So obviously when we think about the two different areas, people do think about offenders, prisoners and so forth in justice. But having said that, in community areas, I also worked with those clients just in, you know, a bit of a different capacity, but still clients who may have committed crimes but were needing some support in another area. In both those areas, you work with voluntary or involuntary clients at times. So clients who don't necessarily want to be there, but have to be there because of court. That might be the case in child protection following a community services course, or it might be the case in corrections following a justice course. You apply law in both those areas, and you've got to really know the law of your relevant area, and you apply ethical principles and privacy and all of that sort of stuff. And I guess the soft skills are fairly similar in both areas. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be able to engage and motivate people. So there's some of the ways in which the roles really do overlap, because those skills are really integral to both of those roles.
Okay, great. And obviously there are some differences, and you sort of highlighted those as well, which is great. Or were there any other differences that you find between the two?
Look, I think that, you know, essentially for a lot of people, they think that, you know, the difference is like the type of client that you will work with. When, you know, I think about offenders as an example, as, you know, really we kind of encourage people to think about offenders where it could be something that happens to a lot of people by grace of not having some supports or a whole range of things in place. So therefore, you know, you're just working at someone in a different point of the spectrum, but they are still the kind of similar client that you're used to working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for our graduates who study a community services qualification or a justice qualification, what careers would be available? So maybe we start with community services, or maybe there's an overlap in careers.
Yeah, look, one of the really popular ones that students who study community services tend to want to do is child protection. That's a really big area. So whether it's child protection or an associated area, because sometimes people think about child protection, but what they actually mean might be family support or placement support or a whole range of of things that support that child protection work, but that's definitely one of the big areas. And of course, the Kangan courses are AQUA accredited, which means that child protection, they're eligible for jobs in child protection. The other kind of area that they may want to go into is corrections, and we see that for both some community services and justice students. Maybe perhaps more of the justice students actually want to go into the corrections field, but it's similar work, case managing offenders. Youth justice is another big one, and again we see an overlap of that in both areas of people wanting to go into that particular area. And then for the justice related jobs, I guess you would see things like border force policing. So a lot of our students are interested in those very specifically justice areas. And then the child protection, in community services, you might have students who are interested in things like homelessness or AOD or mental health. So a lot of those support areas as well. So there are some jobs that really do overlap the skill sets, and then there are different kind of pathways that the students can take.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot of options with either course, really.
And I think that's the great thing about these courses, is that you've actually got a lot of doors that it can open up, and you don't actually have to do the same thing forever. You can really try something very different in your career over time, but stay in the same area if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, is there a type of characteristic, or who would be suited to a career in this industry? Are there types of characteristics that would make people more successful in these types of careers?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that we think is key is integrity. Obviously, in all of those roles that I've talked about, integrity is key in the way you hold yourself. Compassion is another one that is really necessary. Reliability and commitment are, very important. Ethical behaviour, they are, I guess, and depending if you go into those child protection, police, customs related roles, ethical behaviour where you're scrutinised, highly scrutinised, where what you do could be viewed by a whole range of people, is really important. We also talk about empathy as a really important job skill for those types of roles, and being culturally appropriate. So understanding something about different cultures, and that's not just where you're born, but a whole range of other cultures, so that you can actually respond accordingly to the client groups that you work with. So they're the things that we'd really be looking for or recommend people are working on developing.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, while we've got you here, I touched on pathways before. Say if a student were to graduate from a diploma of community services, advanced diploma of justice, whatever it might be, could you touch on a little bit about the types of pathways if they don't want to go straight into a career, if they would like to continue their study?
Absolutely. A lot of our students do consider a career in, a university degree after their TAFE courses. And we believe that our TAFE courses really do set up students well for whether they want to do a degree or go into the workforce. But there are some pathways, and as you said, you mentioned the Federation Uni ones. So there's a pathway, as an example, to Federation Uni from the Diploma and Advanced Diploma of Justice into the Criminal Justice degree. So they, I guess they look at things in a little bit more detail. So they might examine policing in a really different way, a really theoretical and practical way. You might compare that with other countries and things like that. There's also the human services courses for community services students, and we've got some guaranteed entry courses, and we've got a fabulous one at La Trobe as well, which I know we didn't mention earlier, but that's one with for community services students, and they actually go straight into their second year, and it's only delivered to those students. So it's not like you're mixing in with a whole big degree with lots of people you don't know. It's actually just one class once a week. And it's really tailored to students who've already studied the community services diploma. So real understanding of what they already know and building on that. So there are a range of pathways, and sometimes students choose to go to other university courses, which we can help facilitate as well, where you negotiate your own credits. Universities are pretty happy when students come from TAFE and demonstrate established record of study and commitment to study.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I guess for now we might move on to the question portion of the webinar. If anybody's typed any questions or needed or had any questions that they'd like, we could type into the Q&A section. and we'd be happy to answer those for you.
We currently don't have any questions, so maybe just a couple more minutes, Carla, if you would like to talk a little bit about, I suppose, maybe some of the more challenging experiences that you've had in the field, and then versus some of the most rewarding ones, and that gives people a little bit of time to come through with questions.
I often talk about my career in child protection. I was a newbie straight out of university, really young, and often would get a lot of clients asking me, was I even old enough to have kids, when I would be trying to talk to them about some fairly serious issues. And again, I just used, my engagement and communication skills, and that always worked quite well. But I always say that child protection was one of my favourite jobs ever. It is a job that does demand a lot of you. So I do say to students that it's a job that is really super rewarding and that you'll love, but it is demanding. So you have to make sure you put things in place and, take stock of your life. We talk about self-care and it can seem a bit, self-care again, but it is really important. And particularly if you want to work in justice or in community services, to really think about, how can I take care of myself? How can I set my life up so that I can work in a really demanding job and be okay and be supported? So child protection was, as I said, one of my favourite jobs ever, but, it is a demanding job. You do see the worst of people, but you also see the best of people. And, there was nothing like reuniting a child who wanted to return back to their parents and having that parent made everything happen so that that could happen. There's nothing like, seeing that. That's just such beautiful stuff. But having said that, I also loved working in youth justice centres. I loved that, you're kind of trapped in there with your clients. You work 12-hour shifts and that's a long time to be in there, but you get to know these clients in a very different way. It's not just a 1-hour session a week. It's a couple of days in, couple of days out a week where you're seeing all of the different sides. But it also forces you to build a whole range of skills around communicating with people. If someone is aggressive one day or just not having a good day, you can't just walk away. You can't just say, I'm not dealing with this today, see you next week. You actually have to work your way through it. So I saw that as a really good training ground for a whole range of really important skills that has really helped me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see a couple of questions here now, so I'll just get to those ones. So Caroline's asked, is there an element of danger to the industries, i.e. personal injury or altercations?
Look, obviously there's, we train people, and in all of those courses, we would actually do some stuff around worker safety and staying safe. So there is an element in lots of industries, whether you're talking about plumbing, carpentry, to this sort of work. Yes, there is definitely an element where you have to be aware of risks and you have to put things in place to minimise those risks. And that works really well. I had a long career and I was lucky enough to not be injured in the workplace, which is fantastic. And I think that is really possible, but it is always about knowing the level of risk and understanding that. So, the types of risks can be any sorts of injuries related to some of the work. Sometimes you're driving, and I remember driving once down a freeway doing 110 and a client tried to jump out of the car. So, you've got to have very fast skills and something like that. So sometimes, you just don't know. You can't really always predict and expect all of the dangers. But what I do know is that there are lots of really great supports. You listen to people, you learn from people who are more experienced than you. You listen, you don't take risks, and you always do what you can to minimise them.
Absolutely. And she's also just clarified, to be more specific, is about occupational violence. But I guess that's sort of what you touched on there.
Yeah. So, and obviously, like, people think about the police force as an example where there is a range of risks as well there. But we're pretty fortunate in Australia. It's not something that happens very often. A lot of my ex-justice students are now police officers. And, thankfully to this day, none of them have been seriously injured. There's occasionally, I think I had one 2 weeks ago who had her little pinky finger was injured during a bit of a tussle. But thankfully, nothing more major than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Carry on.
Look, I can see the questions now, Danielle. So I'm getting ahead of you.
I think the next one's from Dom. So Dom's asking, is there a good demand for jobs, as in easy to find jobs in justice, which you probably can read right there, but I'll read it out for the webinar.
Yeah. Look, absolutely, Dom. And, you know, it's really unfortunate that when we go through something like what we're experiencing at the moment, it actually creates even more of a demand. So you've probably heard on the news people talking about, you know, the increase in family violence and things like that, which actually creates a demand both in community services areas. You know, we're seeing things like housing affordability, all of that. So that creates, you know, in the homeless and in those services, more jobs, and in justice, you know, in these areas, you definitely need more police, more protective services. So it has a knock-on effect, and there will definitely be an increase in jobs. And the other thing is, when we go through some tough times, what tends to happen is that there'll be a freeze on government jobs, but there's never a freeze on police, corrections, child protection, those sorts of areas. So these are absolutely, I think, the right courses to be doing at the moment. And as I said, a lot of our graduates actually go on to get employment, and Danielle could probably talk a little bit about some of the students in community services who have placement and who get employed as part of their placement opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I guess it might be a question that pops up sooner or later anyway. But so of the 4 courses, the Certificate 4 and Diploma of Community Services and the Diploma and Advanced Diploma, only the Diploma of Community Services has a mandatory placement component to it. So when students are in their first year, at the end of their first year, and at the end of their course in their second year, they will go out on 2 blocks of placement. We source and allocate the placement for the students, and a lot of our students do end up getting jobs from where they've done their placement. So it is a high demand area. And to touch on what you said as well, both the Diploma of Justice and the Diploma of Community Services are on the free TAFE course list, which is an initiative that the government's put in place for areas that really are in high demand. We need skilled people in these areas, which is why they have put them on the free TAFE course list. So, I guess that's just further backing up why that there is a high demand in these areas for jobs and skilled people. How can I differentiate between community services and justice? Differences which will help if this is the right course.
Yeah, that's a good question, Dom. And it's really just about, I guess, what your interest area is. And I think, you know, if people were saying to me, look, I really want to work in border force or policing, then I would say, look, you probably really want to go down the justice path. And if you're saying to me, I really want to work in child protection, then I'd say, well, you know, go down to community services. But if you're not clear and you're not sure, it might be worth actually going to both information sessions. And I know Danielle will give you some information about this at the end, but to actually have some more in-depth discussions and talking to teachers. And there are some students who actually do both. So we do, for the Diploma of Justice, that's also offered part-time in the evenings. We've had some students who've crossed over and done both courses, and there's some credits that may happen there as well. But, you know, it's really just about trying to, I guess, figure out what your interest area is and who you might want to work with. If what you want to do is work a little bit more, I guess, therapeutically in a way with, people, clients in, you know, who may be homeless or experiencing AOD or, you know, mental health issues or the like, or then you might be thinking more about the community services area. And if what interests you is a little bit more about the law, justice, working in courts, then that might be what you choose to do instead. So, you know, it's really about your passion area.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with Carla more about attending an information session or attending both. I mean, they're all run online now, so they're pretty accessible, and you'll get a lot more information about what you'll be studying in those information sessions, and I think that'll really help you determine which one is the path you want to go down, or both. So I can see. I won't try and pronounce your name. I will finish my diploma in interpreting RMIT by December 2020. Am I eligible to study Advanced Diploma of Justice? I normally work for police court interpreting for 3 years. So I'll let Carla answer that one.
Okay, so are you eligible for your diploma? So just going off that information, if you've completed a diploma, then yes, you can go onto a higher course. However, having said that, the Advanced Diploma of Justice is actually a bit tricky in how it sounds because it does incorporate all of the diploma subjects. So you have to do the Diploma of Justice and then progress into the Advanced Diploma. We can't actually issue an Advanced Diploma unless someone has done all of the core units or equivalent of the diploma. But that, having said that, you can come along to an information session, you can talk about any previous studies you have, what might be able to be recognised, how much time that would take, because there are definitely some options there as well.
Yeah. Anything to do with eligibility, Carla's right. They determine those in information sessions. And sometimes there's pathways. Sometimes there's pathways around or to assist if you're not eligible, but you might become eligible. I can't see any other questions, but something that occurred to me anyway, as Carla mentioned, Diploma of Justice is a prerequisite for the Advanced Diploma. However, if you are looking at doing community services, a Certificate 4 is not a prerequisite, but it is, well, it just depends where you're at and your confidence level with study, and also your confidence that this is the career that you want to go down. A Certificate 4, well, I think Carla's probably better off talking about it, but a Certificate 4 is a great introductory course for you to community services. If you are not wanting to commit to you in a year and a half of study or plus placement, the placement aspect of it, a Certificate 4 is a great way to introduce you into the course, but it's not a prerequisite.
Yeah, and I think we'll actually have to wrap up there, guys, as we've got to get back in and run the next webinar.
No
but
worries.
thank you very much for that. I can see Dom has some questions. So Dom, if you just ask in the live chat those questions and direct them there, we'll be able to give you a hand with all the information you need.
Perfect.
Great. Well,
thank you.
Yes, thanks for coming, everybody. And I'll just pop up onto your screen now where you can go for further information. Bear with me 1 second. So if you want to apply if you've decided which course is right for you, you can apply on the Kangan website. Contact our customer service for any course inquiries that you have. And if they are, if you'd like to speak to somebody from the department, they can pop you through. And if you want to register for an information session, you can visit the Kangan website. But like Catherine said, if you want to jump onto the live chat, they can also send you through those details there of the upcoming ones. And thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.